Heidegger's smoking gun. There are two of Heidegger's seminars which clearly disturb the official picture of a Heidegger who only externally accommodated himself to the Nazi regime in order to save whatever could be saved of the university's autonomy. On the Essence and Notion of Nature, History and State, Winter 1933-34, protocol conserved in the Deutsches Literaturarchiv, Marbach am Neckar. Hegel on the State, Winter 1934-35, protocol also conserved in the DLA. Significantly, the first of the two is not included in the official Gesamtausgabe by Klostermann Verlag, a fact that renders problematic its designation as a complete edition. These two seminars are the closest one can get to the proverbial smoking gun, since they enact precisely what, according to the official Heideggerian doxa, did not, could not, and should not have taken place. Full-bodied support for Nazism formulated and grounded in Heidegger's innermost philosophical project. It is nonetheless wrong for a philosopher to invest too much into finding smoking guns. They only confirm what is already there in the formal structure of a thought. However, one should not lose one's nerve too fast here and let oneself fall into the standard liberal condemnation. Heidegger's failure is not as easy to locate as it may appear. The atmosphere of Heidegger's political references in his texts and courses from the 1930s, the examples he uses, etc., is, as expected, ominous. Suffice it to recall the beginning of the paragraph which questions the being of a state. A state, it is. In what consists its being? In that the state police arrests a suspect? The very example he uses to illustrate what Hegel means by his claim about the speculative identity of the rational and the actual is, again, ominous. The Treaty of Versailles is actual, but not rational. Heidegger's starting point is a defense of Hegel against the famous proclamation by Carl Schmitt that Hegel died in 1933 when Hitler took over. It was said that Hegel died in 1933. Quite the contrary. It was only then that he first began to live. Why? Heidegger endorses Hegel's thesis on the state as the highest form of social existence. The highest actualization of human being occurs in the state. He even directly ontologizes the state, defining the relationship between the people and the state in terms of ontological difference. The people, the existing, has a fully determined relationship towards its being, towards the state. However, in what follows, it soon becomes clear that Heidegger only needs Hegel in order to assert the emerging Nazi total state against the liberal notion of the state as a means to regulate the interaction of civil society. He approvingly refers to Hegel's deployment of the limitation of the external state, the state of necessity, the state of understanding, the system of civil society. We cannot grasp what Hegel understands as freedom if we take it as an essential determination of a singular I. Freedom is only actual where there is a community of I's, of subjects. But Hegel understands by freedom also this. He insists on the modern principle of the individual's infinite right. For Hegel, civil society is the great modern achievement, the condition of actual freedom, the material basis of mutual recognition. And his problem is precisely how to unite the unity of the state and the dynamic mediation of civil society without curtailing the rights of civil society. The young Hegel, especially in his System der Sittlichkeit, was still fascinated by the Greekpolis as the organic unity of individual and society. Here, social substance does not yet stand opposed to individuals as a cold, abstract, objective legality imposed from outside, but as the living unity of customs, of a collective ethical life in which individuals are at home, recognizing it as their own substance. From this perspective, cold universal legality is a regression from the organic unity of customs, the regression from Greece to the Roman Empire. Although Hegel soon accepted that the subjective freedom of modernity has to be accepted, that the organic unity of polis is forever lost, he nonetheless insisted on a need for some kind of return to renewed organic unity, to a new polis that would offer, as a counterpart to individuals, a deeper sense of social solidarity and organic unity over and above the mechanistic interaction and individualist competition of civil society. Hegel's crucial step towards maturity occurs when he really abandons the paradigm of the polis by way of reconceptualizing the role of civil society. First, civil society is for Hegel the state of understanding. The state reduced to the police apparatus regulating the chaotic interaction of individuals, each of whom pursues his egotistic interests. Such an individualistic atomistic notion of freedom and the notion of legal order as imposed on individuals as the external limitation of their freedom are strictly correlative. The need thus arises to pass from this state of understanding to the true state of reason, in which the individual's subjective dispositions are harmonized with the social whole, in which individuals recognize the social substance as their own. The crucial step occurs when Hegel fully develops the mediating role of civil society, the system of multilateral dependence, whose ultimate modern form is the market economy, the system in which particular and universal are separated and opposed, in which every individual pursues only his private goals, in which organic social unity decomposes into external mechanic interaction, which is in itself already the reconciliation of the particular and the universal in the guise of the famous invisible hand of the market, on account of which, by pursuing private interests at the expense of others, every individual contributes to the welfare of all. It is thus not simply that one has to overcome the mechanical external interaction of civil society in a higher organic unity. Civil society and its disintegration play a crucial mediating role, so that the true reconciliation, which does not abolish modern subjective freedom, should recognize how this disintegration is in itself already its opposite, a force of integration. Reconciliation is thus radically immanent. It implies a shift of perspective as to what first appears as disintegration. In other words, insofar as civil society is the sphere of alienation, of the separation between subjectivity persisting in its abstract individuality, and the objective social order opposing it as an external necessity that curtails its freedom, the resources of reconciliation should be found in this very sphere, in what, in this sphere, appears at first sight as the least spiritual, as the most alienating, the system of needs, not in the passage to another higher sphere. The structure of this reconciliation in the mature Hegel is, again, that of the Rabinovich joke. There are two reasons modern society is reconciled with itself. The first is the interaction within civil society. But that interaction is constant strife, the very mechanism of disintegration, of ruthless competition. Well, this is the second reason, since the very strife and competition makes individuals thoroughly interdependent, and thus generates the ultimate social bond. The whole perspective thus changes. It is no longer that the organic Sittlichkeit of the polis disintegrates under the corrosive influence of modern abstract individuality in its multiple modes, the market economy, Protestantism, and so on, and that this unity should somehow be restored at a higher level. The point of Hegel's analyses of antiquity, best exemplified by his repeated readings of Antigone, is that the Greek polis itself was already marked, cut through, by fatal immanent antagonisms, public-private, masculine-feminine, human-divine, free slaves, etc., which belie its organic unity. Abstract universal individualism, Christianity, far from causing the disintegration of Greek organic unity, was, on the contrary, the necessary first step towards true reconciliation. With regard to the market, far from being simply a corrosive force, it is market interaction which provides the mediating process, which forms the basis of true reconciliation between the universal and the particular. Market competition brings people really together, while organic order divides them. The best indication of this shift, in the mature Hegel, concerns the opposition of customs and law. For the early Hegel, the transformation of customs into institutionalized law is a regressive move from organic unity to alienation. The norm is no longer experienced as part of my substantial ethical nature, but as an external force that constrains my freedom. While for the mature Hegel, this transformation is a crucial step forward, opening up and sustaining the space of modern subjective freedom. It is in total opposition to these Hegelian insights that Heidegger deploys his notion of a total state. We are talking about a total state. This state is not a particular domain, among others. It is not an apparatus which is here to protect society from the state itself, a domain with which only some people have to deal. The people thus wills and loves the state as its own way and manner to be as a people. The people is dominated by the striving, by eros, for the state. This eros, of course, implies personification. Love is always love for the one, the leader. The Führer state, the one we have, means the accomplishment of the historical development, the actualization of the people in the Führer. It is only the leader's will which makes others into his followers, and community arises out of this relationship of following. The followers' sacrifice and service originate in this living connection, not in their obedience to the constraint of institutions. The leader has something to do with the people's will. This will is not the sum of singular wills, but a whole of a primordial authenticity. The question of the consciousness of the will of a community is a problem in all democracies, which can only be resolved in a fruitful way when one recognizes the leader's will and the people's will in their essentiality. Our task today is to arrange the founding relationship of our communal being in the direction of this actuality of people and leader, where, as its actuality, the two cannot be separated. Only when this basic scheme is asserted in its essential aspect through its application is true leadership possible. This, of course, is again totally opposed to Hegel, for whom the head of a rational state should not be a leader, but a king. Why? Let us take a look at Hegel's infamous deduction of the rational necessity of hereditary monarchy. The bureaucratic chain of knowledge has to be supplemented by the king's decision as the completely concrete objectivity of the will, which reabsorbs all particularity into its single self, cuts short the weighing of pros and cons between which it lets itself oscillate perpetually, now this way and now that, and by saying "I will," makes its decision and so inaugurates all activity and actuality. This is why the concept of the monarch is, of all conceptions, the hardest for ratiocination, i.e., for the method of reflection employed by the understanding. In the next paragraph, Hegel further elaborates the speculative necessity of the monarch. This ultimate self in which the will of the state is concentrated is, when thus taken in abstraction, a single self, and therefore is immediate individuality. Hence its natural character is implied in its very conception. The monarch, therefore, is essentially characterized as this individual, in abstraction from all his other characteristics, and this individual is raised to the dignity of monarch in an immediate, natural fashion, i.e., through his birth in the course of nature. The speculative moment that understanding cannot grasp is the transition of the concept of pure self-determination into the immediacy of being, and so into the realm of nature. In other words, while understanding can well grasp the universal mediation of a living totality, what it cannot grasp is that this totality, in order to actualize itself, has to acquire actual existence in the guise of an immediate, natural singularity. The term natural should be given its full weight here, in the same way that, at the end of the logic, the idea's completed self-mediation releases itself from nature, collapses into the external immediacy of nature. The state's rational self-mediation has to acquire actual existence in a will which is determined as directly natural, unmediated, stricto sensu irrational. While observing Napoleon on a horse in the streets of Jena after the Battle of 1807, Hegel remarked that it was as if he had seen the world spirit riding a horse. The Christological implications of this remark are obvious. What happened in the case of Christ is that God himself, the creator of our entire universe, was walking around as a common individual. This mystery of incarnation is discernible at different levels, up to the parent's speculative judgment apropos a child. Out there our love is walking. which stands for the Hegelian reversal of determinate reflection into reflexive determination. The same as with a king, when his subjects sees him walking round. Out there, our state is walking. Marx's evocation of reflexive determination, in his famous footnote in Chapter 1 of Capital, also falls short here. Individuals think that they treat a person as a king because he is a king in himself, while in fact he is a king only because they treat him as one. However, the crucial point is that this reification of a social relation in a person cannot be dismissed as a simple fetishistic misperception. What such a dismissal itself misses is something that perhaps could be designated as the Hegelian performative. Of course, a king is in himself a miserable individual. Of course, he is a king only insofar as his subjects treat him as one. However, the point is that the fetishistic illusion which sustains our veneration of a king has in itself a performative dimension. The very unity of our state, that which the king embodies, actualizes itself only in the person of a king. Which is why it is not enough to insist on the need to avoid the fetishistic trap and to distinguish between the contingent person of a king and what he stands for. What the king stands for only comes to be in his person. The same as with a couple's love, which, at least within a certain traditional perspective, only becomes actual in their offspring. So far, Hegel seems to say the same thing as Heidegger. There is, however, a key difference, made clear in the addition to paragraph 280. Addition. It is often alleged against monarchy that it makes the welfare of the state dependent on chance. For, it is urged, the monarch may be ill-educated. He may perhaps be unworthy of the highest position in the state, and it is senseless that such a state of affairs should exist because it is supposed to be rational. But all this rests on a presupposition which is nugatory, namely that everything depends on the monarch's particular character. In a completely organized state, it is only a question of the culminating point of formal decision, and a natural bulwark against passion. It is wrong, therefore, to demand objective qualities in a monarch. He has only to say yes and dot the I, because the throne should be such that the significant thing in its holder is not his particular makeup. In a well-organized monarchy, the objective aspect belongs to law alone, and the monarch's part is merely to set to the law the subjective I will. What is missing in Heidegger is this reduction of the function of the monarch to the purely formal function of dotting the I's. That is, the separation between what today we would call the constative and the performative aspects, or in Lacan's terms, the chain of knowledge and the master signifier. The objective aspect of governing a state, the content of laws and measures, which is the business of the expert bureaucracy, and its transformation into a subjective decision of the state that is to be enacted. Heidegger's concept of the leader confounds precisely the two dimensions Hegel strives to keep apart. The further paradox of Hegel's notion of monarchy is that the king is the constitutive exception which, as such, guarantees the universal legal equality of all other subjects. No wonder that, in contrast to Hegel, Heidegger explicitly rejects equality in favor of a hierarchy of grades enforced by the leader. To domination belongs power, which creates a hierarchy of grades through the imposition of the will of the one who rules, insofar as he is actually powerful, i.e., insofar as he disposes those under his rule. Heidegger, passe those who accuse him of leaving out of consideration the cruel aspects of ancient Greek life, slavery and so on, openly draws attention to how rank and dominance are directly grounded in a disclosure of being, thereby providing a direct ontological grounding for the social relations of domination. If people today from time to time are going to busy themselves rather too eagerly with the polis of the Greeks, they should not suppress this side of it. Otherwise, the concept of the polis easily becomes innocuous and sentimental. What is higher in rank is what is stronger. Thus, being logos, as the gathered harmony, is not easily available for every man at the same price, but is concealed, as opposed to that harmony which is always mere equalizing, the elimination of tension, leveling. Who then is the enemy of such a hierarchical order? The Janus head of non-hierarchical egalitarianism with its two faces, bourgeois liberal individualism and communist egalitarianism, grounded in Judeo-Christian spirituality, which is thus the common source and foundation of both opposed strands of modern politics. In accordance to its mode, Jewish Christian domination plays a double game, taking simultaneously the side of the dictatorship of the proletariat and the side of the liberal democratic cultural striving. For some time, this double game will continue to conceal our already present loss of roots and inability to take essential decisions. And Heidegger goes even a step further here, against the liberal democratic doxa. In the alternative between communism and liberalism, English democratic liberalism is the more dangerous. The bourgeois Christian form of English Bolshevism is the most dangerous. Without its annihilation, the modern era will continue to be maintained. Distrust of democracy is a constant feature of Heidegger's thought, even after the Kehre. We find it in his Nietzsche lectures from 1936 to 37, where he wrote that Europe always wants to cling to democracy and does not want to see that this would be a fateful death for it, as well as in his posthumously published Spiegel interview, where he expressed his doubt that democracy was the political form that best fits modern technology.